Welcome to FFBR Live, the podcast extension of Final Fight Bible Radio. It is Friday, December 5th, 2025. I am Matt Crane, station manager of this Christian radio ministry. And today, I am going to take you back to the ancient times, and we will survey multiple ancient cultures, where we will observe the striking parallels of a universal belief in a central, benevolent deity whose residence was the North Pole. Thank you for being with us this Friday. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Glad that you could be joining us today, and I've got several things going on at the moment. I'm actually doing a live stream on YouTube as we speak. So if you would like to check that out, you can find the Final Fight Bible Radio YouTube channel at Final Fight Bible Radio. It's the YouTube and then the @ or whatever, @ and then it's Final Fight Bible Radio. I have the link posted in the chat room, which is also open at the moment. So please feel free to check that out. And if you want the direct link to the chat, you can see that there and check out the live stream on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to Final Fight Bible Radio on YouTube. There's a couple different Final Fight Bible Radio posts on YouTube that I saw. I haven't had a chance really to check them out. I think one of them is from a long time ago when one of my helpers tried to get our stream broadcast onto YouTube, and I guess it's still there, so ignore that one. But the handle is the @ Final Fight Bible Radio. All right, so going to be trying the live stream, and in the coming weeks, if everything goes well, I will expand this live stream to Rumble as well as Facebook and the other social media platforms and try to get the word out as much as possible. So if you enjoy watching as opposed to listening, please feel free to check that out. Hopefully everything goes well. And if something is not working right, please let me know in the chat room, and I will be monitoring everything as I go. I've been dealing with kind of a weird echo with the live stream, which I think I have taken care of at the moment. I don't think I should have an echo at this point, but with the live stream I was having an echo. So hopefully that's taken care of. Anyway, I want to say thank you to our listening audience who sent in the thankfulness recordings over the Thanksgiving period. There was a couple recordings that came in late. I didn't get them on the station in time. Don't worry, I'll have them on the station for next Thanksgiving. But thank you for all of you who participated in that. I do appreciate it. I always love having the listening audience participate in this radio ministry and express to the other listeners what you're thankful for. I love the time of year of Thanksgiving. I like to take any opportunity I can to give praise and glory to God. All right, hang on just a second. I've got a call coming in on another phone. I'm not going to take the call, but I don't want it buzzing in my ear in the background. All right. Also, by way of announcements, we have the Final Fight Bible Radio Premium holiday stream available. So if you enjoy listening to Christmas music, please feel free to check that out. You can get a free month for FFBR Premium. Normally it's $5 a month. You can cancel anytime, but we're going to go ahead and give you the first month free so you can try it out. You can listen to holiday music throughout the month of December. And in addition to the holiday stream, there's a music stream, a preaching stream, a teaching-only stream, a kids stream, and a scripture-only stream, as well as audiobooks and the FFBR Live archive. So be sure to check that out. If you're not already a premium subscriber, I recommend you try it out. And if you are a premium subscriber, number one, I want to say thank you. And number two, I also, if you've been a premium subscriber in the past and maybe you're not anymore, maybe give it another try. And if you don't like the app, which does have a couple functionality issues, I recommend trying ffbrmobile.com. Save it to your phone's home screen. It works way better, I think, than the app. And it also saves your login information so you don't have to type it in each time. That's ffbrmobile.com. All right. Also, if you have any topic requests for FFBR Live, I just ask that you go ahead and shoot me an email, put it in the chat room. If there's a topic that you'd like me to discuss or talk about or give a biblical answer to, please feel free to post those. I've had a couple people ask me some questions over the last few weeks or ask me if I would do a lesson on such and such. And so in the new year, I'm going to be honoring those requests and trying to get those taken care of, so I'm looking forward to that. And also, don't forget, we have the New Orleans Street Preaching Blast, April 16th through the 18th. So if you've never street preached before, that'd be a great opportunity to learn, just jumping in the deep end. But don't worry, you'll have several veterans that will teach you how to street preach, how to project your voice, how to minister out in the public open forum like that. You can find more information on our website in regards to that. And then finally, if you are still looking for Christmas presents for friends and family and you're just not really sure what the perfect present would be, or maybe you need a white elephant present for your next gathering with friends and family, I highly recommend you check out the books that I have available on the FFBR store. We have The Doctrine of the Doors, which has to do with the Tower of Babel, fallen angels, and teleportation technology. Then we have Eden's Fate, which has to do with whatever happened to the Garden of Eden, and a lot of other interesting things in that book, which I don't want to spoil for you, but I can tell you there's a lot of information in that book that you have not heard before. Let me just put it that way. And backed up with the scripture too, by the way. All right, and then also we have the Time of the End 1, which has to do with my teaching on the 10-year tribulation period, the time of the end being 10 years from the rapture to the second advent of Jesus Christ, along with the conditional rapture of Jewish tribulation saints partway through the end times. So if you've never heard of any of what I just said, check that book out. And then finally, there's the Time of the End 2, which has to do with the nations of the last days and a lot of the geopolitical machinations post-church rapture, as well as a very interesting chapter on President Donald Trump and the potential prophecy that he may be slated to fulfill. So if you've never checked out those books, please do that. I'm sure anybody that you give those books to will be happy once they've read them. When they see the book, they might not be that happy once they see the book, but once they've read the book, they'll be glad that you gave them the book. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and go to one more break, and when we come back, we'll get into this study of the North Pole theology. Stay tuned.
The Bible says, "And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters." You're listening to Final Fight Bible Radio.
All right, welcome back. Well, I've been studying so many things for the last, I'd say, a couple years. There's a few topics in particular that have just been stuck in my mind for the last several years, and in addition to that, I've been reading several books on these particular subjects, and I've also been obviously continuing my Bible reading, and I'm at a point in my life where I feel like the Lord is really just showing me so many things, and especially from my Bible reading. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but it's almost one of those things where I can't pick up my Bible without learning something new, without I feel like the Lord showing me something. It just seems like the Bible has become extremely rich to me. It has been in the past. I'm not saying that this is like the first time this has happened, but it's just, man, the Lord has shown me so many things. I've got, let's see, where is it? I've got a book right here. I keep a journal of the things that the Lord shows me as I'm reading my Bible. And so I've got several things that I write whenever I'm going through my Bible reading and something pops out. I like to write it down. And sometimes writing things down ends up causing other thoughts to solidify as well. But I've got probably about 25 of these journals. on my shelf, and there's just so much information that I want to get out. There's just so much things in my head. I've said in the past, I've got like 7 books ready to write in my brain. It's just having the time and the ability to put it out. And I do, honestly, I get a little frustrated with myself, not with the Lord, but I get frustrated with myself because there's just so much really interesting information that I want to give to people, but I feel like it's just such a slow trickle getting out. I also am of the opinion that the Lord is going to be returning within the next few years. I don't believe it's going to be very far away. I think most of us Bible believers feel the same way, that we're probably here close to the end with the Lord's return at the rapture. But it's one of those things. It's like, man, I don't want the rapture to happen and me have all this information that God has shown me in my brain. I want to get it out before that happens. I want to try to teach these things. And so I'm in the process of writing a book, and I'm going to continue to do that as the Lord opens up more time for me. But, book writing is slow. Let's just face it. It's slow. It's thorough. You get the information laid out very well in book form, but it is very slow. So this alternative media of Final Fight Bible Radio and FFBR Live, and now the live stream on YouTube and social media, it's another way I can try to get some of this information out. Even if it's just in a small trickle, at least it's getting some of it out. So I'm going to get some of that out today. Now, I have been in Bible-believing churches for most of my life, and my wife has as well. My wife has been in Bible-believing churches longer than I have. And by Bible-believing, I mean they believe the King James Bible from cover to cover. We take a literal interpretation of the Scriptures as opposed to just completely allegorical. We don't correct the Bible with the Hebrew and the Greek and things like that. I've been in those type of churches, conservative, fundamentalist, dispensational, Bible-believing King James churches for most of my life. And I'm not going to say that I've heard it all, because that would be ridiculous. Nobody's heard it all. But listen, I've heard enough that when I go to church, a lot of this stuff, it just sounds repetitive. It's hard to, it's not often that I sit down and actually hear something I haven't heard before. And a lot of you are in that same situation too. You've been in church maybe for a decade or 2 decades, and it gets repetitive. It's good to hear the same sermon more than once, obviously. It's good to be reminded of things. But when it comes to hearing new things, new concepts, new ideas, it starts to become very repetitive over time. And so I would say that after 25 years of being in these circles, I am very familiar with the teachings among Bible believers. Okay, I think that's fair. I am very familiar with the teachings that Bible believers and the mentality of Bible believers and the way Bible believers think. And so because of this background, I know when I'm saying something that you probably haven't heard before. Now, maybe you have. Maybe you have heard some of the things that I'm going to be talking about and some of the things that I've mentioned on previous episodes in your church. And maybe I'm not saying I'm the only one that's ever said these things. But again, I've heard so many pastors, I've been to so many conferences, I've listened to so many missionaries, so many evangelists, so many teaching. I've been in 5 years of formal Bible school, graduated one that was 3 years long, and almost graduated one that was 2 years long, or 3 years long, but I only got through 2 years. So I've been in 5 years of formal Bible education where I'm going every single night to school for multiple hours a night. It gets to the point where you've kind of heard it all. You've heard every single interpretation, just about every interpretation there is when it comes to these various things in the Bible. So what I'm saying is, I know when I'm saying something that you probably haven't heard before. And I know when I'm teaching something that's, you might say, new, or that Bible believers are not familiar with. And I know when I'm expressing an opinion that's out of the ordinary, okay? And I don't have a problem doing this either. It'd be easy for me just to repeat the same things that I've been taught and the same things that I've always heard. Because sometimes when you teach something new, or when you give a new opinion or a new idea, you end up rocking the boat. And frankly, some of the older guard, some of the older guys, the older preachers, the older teachers, they don't like it when some of these young bucks like myself teach something that's contrary to what they teach. It makes people uncomfortable. Because the idea is, well, if you're right, then it implies that this other person is wrong. And surely this other person can't be wrong. Now, the reason why I don't have a problem teaching new ideas. It's not that I'm looking for something new and I just have to have something new. I'm not like those Athenians in Acts 17 where all they existed for was just to hear some new thing. It's not like that. But I am of the opinion that the Word of God is the mind of God on paper. And how are we going to exhaust the mind of God? I feel like it's safe to say that we probably haven't even scratched the surface of the knowledge that's contained in the pages of Scripture, given that it is the mind of God. Now, if you don't believe the Bible is the Word of God, then you probably would scoff at such a statement. But if you believe that the Scriptures are the mind of God on paper, the words of God, the intelligence of God communicated to us, then no doubt there is a lot left to be mined in the pages of this Bible. And I have studied long enough and seen incorrect teaching long enough that I don't have a problem looking for other explanations when a teaching seems to be contradictory. And I also don't have a problem with being able to say that I'm wrong when I'm wrong. Now that's a very helpful key, because if you can't admit that you're wrong, then you're just going to keep pressing forward with the things that you've always thought, and you'll never change. And so there's been several things over the last 15 years of my ministry that I've taught, and I look back in the past and I say, I don't necessarily agree with that anymore. And my ideas have shifted and changed a little bit in terms of what I believe on certain issues. And because I can do that, I don't have a problem when I recognize that somebody else is wrong about what they've been teaching. And so with this knowledge, I'm able to expand and go beyond the boundaries sometimes of the theology that's been put in place over the last, since the New Testament was written. It's one of those things, it's not like I'm trying to break down barriers or anything like that. It's just there's so much more to the Scripture than we realize. So anyway, a perfect example of that is the lesson I did on gluttony last Friday, or 2 Fridays ago. What I taught there on gluttony, I've never heard taught before. That was not taught to me. Now, you might disagree with what I said 2 Fridays ago, and that's totally fine. You might say, Matt, you're wrong, and that's fine. But you have to admit, what I said was out of the ordinary. The way I taught gluttony last week, guilt-free gluttony, is probably a way you've never heard it taught before. At least in my 25 years, I never heard it taught that way. And I'm saying all that just as a little bit of an intro, because these Final Fight Bible Radio Live episodes that I do, almost every single episode contains somewhere in the episode some new concepts and new ideas that you've probably never heard before. And I've got a whole archive of these episodes going back to 2023 that are available on FFBR Premium. And this is not a sales pitch for FFBR Premium. I'm just saying, if you want to hear some things you've never heard before, if you're getting kind of bored with just kind of the same old, you want to hear some in-depth Bible teaching, check out the archive of FFBR Live. Go back and listen to some of those episodes. I promise you, there are some episodes in there that will blow your mind, and you will always hear something, and you'll probably walk away from, I'd say 9 out of 10 episodes saying, I hadn't thought about it that way. I do these lessons, and I put all the work into this because I believe in what I'm saying. I believe that what I have to offer is special and it's important. Not because I'm special or I'm important. It's just that I believe the Lord has shown me things and I'm trying to show it to you. And I want you to see it. And I don't necessarily want it just be buried in an archive. I want you to find it. All right? So check out the FFBR Live archive and go back and listen to some of these episodes. After this episode's over, go back and listen to an old one. You're going to learn some interesting things. So moving on. It is December. And because it's this time of year, it's Christmas time. We have our peppermint mochas from Starbucks. This is actually a gingerbread latte that I have. But it's Christmas time, and so the idea of Santa Claus and Christmas trees is prevalent in our society. I don't like the idea of Santa Claus. I don't teach Santa Claus to my kids or any of that stuff. We don't go through the motions and, teach them about, let them think that Santa's real until they get a little bit older. And the reason why I don't do that, and if you want to do that, that's your business, but the reason why I don't do that is because I don't want my kids thinking coming to realize when they're a little bit older, oh, Santa's fake. Everything my parents told me about Santa that I believed is actually not true. And then have them connect Santa Claus to Jesus Christ. Oh, well, how do I know Jesus is real? I've never seen him. He's probably just as fake as Santa Claus. I don't want my kids thinking that. So we don't do the Santa Claus thing. But regardless, the whole Santa thing is in the zeitgeist of our modern society at this time of year. And so let me ask you this. What is the typical motif of Christmas? Well, you have Santa, the fat man with his red suit, his bag full of Christmas presents built by the elves up there at the North Pole, right? And you have, he lives there up there at the North Pole with Mrs. Santa Claus, I guess, which in the most recent, I think it's an Amazon commercial. I'm not sure what company it was, but there was some commercial that came on the other day, and it had Santa Claus, and his wife, Mrs. Santa Claus, was a black woman at the North Pole. It's just like, come on. The North Pole, an interracial marriage. Santa, give me a break. So anyway, but he lives at the North Pole with the elves, and he brings gifts to the good, and the bad are given what? The bad kids are given a black rock. They're given a piece of coal. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about on this episode, and probably next episode, we'll see how it goes, is there's a lot of reasons. Like, what does coal have to do with anything? Why give a kid a piece of coal? Like where did that come from? Who came up with that? That's just so off the wall and arbitrary. But interestingly enough, that concept goes back to extremely ancient times. We might even say primordial times. When I say primordial, I'm not referring to trillions of years ago and millions of years ago, back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about primordial as in the beginning of civilization. More like post-flood, Tower of Babel, up to the times of Abraham, maybe even extending to the time of the Exodus, like those times from 2250 BC to 1500 BC, primordial, all right? These things go way back, way back. And Santa, he flies around in the sky at night in his magic sleigh, which is a chariot or a sled or even a sleigh like a boat, something like that. He flies around in the sky pulled by 9 reindeer, right? And what a strange conglomeration of ideas and apparent absurdities and abstract thoughts. Now, the familiar story of Santa and his workshop and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and all that stuff, these are all fairly recent evolutions of a very ancient archetype that must have had some basis in reality at some time in the early stages of Earth's history. Maybe pre-flood, probably pre-flood to an extent. But the thing about Noah's flood is when Noah's flood happened, there was only 8 survivors of that calamity, Noah and his family. And so it's not like humanity going forward had memories of the pre-flood times. The only ones that would have remembered would have been Noah and his family. And then if they had told their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren about the pre-flood world, which I assume they probably did, still, those children and those grandchildren, they would have had no context or no comprehension of what it was that they were describing. Because they just lived in a completely different world at that time, an environment that was vastly different than it was before. So it's unlikely that those stories would have necessarily perpetuated throughout the generations and taken on the magnitude of the mythologies that we have today. Generally speaking, we write off the mythologies of ancient times as relating to the pre-flood giants and the times before the flood. But when you actually break it down and think about that's not going to work quite as well as we would like it to as Bible believers. But there is another explanation, and I'm going to get into some of that today. So rather than give you my hypothesis, I'm going to try to let the ancient writers and the oldest manuscripts on earth speak for themselves today. And what I'll be relating to you today is, honestly, to me, one of the most fascinating areas of research I've ever stumbled upon. And what's incredible to me is how prolific and widely distributed this information is across the ancient world, and yet virtually no one knows about it in our modern age. I didn't know about it. I was almost 38 years old before I knew anything about what I'm about to talk to you about, and I've done a lot of reading. All right? This stuff is it's amazing. Well, anyway, we'll get into it. In ancient times, what I'm going to be talking about today is practically the only thing that anyone in the ancient times and the most ancient of manuscripts ever even talked about. Like the things that they wrote, it's all the same. They are all talking about virtually the same thing. It's like all they ever had to say for the most part. And yet in modern times, again, nobody's even familiar with the things that the entire ancient world had to say. I mean, how often is it that people read the cuneiform manuscripts and tablets from Sumer and Acadia? I mean, they have them translated nowadays, but who reads that stuff? Well, I've been reading that stuff, and wow, they have some interesting things to say. What I will tell you, what I'll be talking about today relates to the field of what's called comparative mythology, which is essentially the study of ancient mythologies around the world and the remarkable similarities of legends that every culture has with one another. And some try to write this off as the diffusion of an invented story that was passed from one culture to another until everybody eventually had the same story, and that's why a lot of the ancient mythologies match, is because someone somewhere invented this stupid idea, this crazy idea, this fairy tale that was totally invented, and then they told it to somebody else, and they told it to somebody else, and like the telephone game, it just got really crazy over time and varied from culture to culture with different names and different actions and things like that. No, I'm sorry. If you read what the investigators, the researchers, the archaeologists, the historians, all of these people that take this field of study seriously have to say, the diffusion theory doesn't work. Nobody cares about other stories from other cultures and adopts them to the point of where they're worshiping and sacrificing their children for these stories. There's more to it than that. It's not that simple. The diffusion theory is not that simple. Furthermore, what we call mythology was not mythology to the most ancient civilizations like Babel, Sumer, Acadia, Egypt, India, Persia, China. To them, it was actual history, and not only that, it was literal, visible theology. The things the ancients wrote about and the modern scholars tend to allegorize and relegate to fanciful imagination. All right, so the ancient writers, they wrote about these things, but modern scholars relegate it to fanciful imagination, and they try to seek out psychological explanations for the inexplicable things that the ancients recorded. Yet when you actually read the ancient texts and listen to the ancients themselves and what they have to say, you clearly see that the writers are taking what they're saying very seriously. It's not just some crazy story that they came up with. They're taking it very seriously, and they're describing things in such a way as if they're witnessing them with their own eyes, and they could see and give details about the things they're talking about, and they describe location, they describe size and specific measurements, color, and number. When you read their writings, you get the impression that they knew exactly what they were talking about, and they were writing it down so future generations could know what they saw. Very similar to how John, when he saw New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, he's giving measurements, right? He's describing the color of the city. He's describing details to the point where you know that John is describing something that he's witnessing, right? He's not just inventing it out of his head, out of thin air. No, he's describing something he's witnessing, and that's how the writers of these ancient manuscripts write when they're describing the things that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. All right? They never intended that their writings be regarded as myth any more than God intended for his scriptures to be relegated to allegory. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to read to you many of the things that the ancients wrote, and they all, with basically no exception, wrote about a North Pole theology. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus.
The Bible says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. You're listening to Final Fight Bible Radio.
All right, we're back, and I was able during the break to look at the comments in the YouTube section there, and a lot of people were mentioning there was no sound. I apologize for that. There is a reason for that, and the reason is that with YouTube, there's all kinds of AI bots that try to monitor channels a lot now, and I don't want to get my channel taken down because of music copyright issues. All right, so I don't want to get all these flags and stuff. I'll probably get taken down for something I say at some point. But as far as the copyrighted music stuff goes, I have to be careful with that. So I'll probably end up adding some kind of elevator music maybe next week while the slides are going there when I'm on a break, because I can't, like I said, I can't play copyrighted music on YouTube. So I have to be careful about that. So just stand by. It's going to be silent during the breaks, but everything else should be working fine. Also, I'll be incorporating more features to the video broadcast here before too much longer, including being able to show you some of my documents, showing screenshots of things. And I just had to make sure that everything's working properly first and just kind of take it easy this first time around. All right. So let's go ahead and get started about North Pole theology. So I've got so many things here that I don't think we'll be able to get through all of it. But let's just go ahead and look at some of these things and see where it goes. All right, so the first I'm going to start with talking about the Saturn myth, written by David Talbot in 1980. And he talks about, even today in our celebration of Christmas, we live under the influence of the polar planet of ancient times. And Manly Hall agrees and observes Saturn, the old man who lives at the North Pole, and brings with him to the children often a sprig of evergreen tree or Christmas tree, is familiar to the little folks under the name Santa Claus. Santa Claus, descending yearly from his polar home to distribute gifts around the world, is a muffled echo of the universal monarch of ancient writers, the primordial Osiris in Egypt, or Yama in India, or Kronos in Greece, spreading miraculous good fortune. He said in the book Paradise Found, written by W.F. Warren, which I'll talk about in just a minute, he writes this: the religions of all ancient nations associate the abode of the supreme God with the North Pole, the center of heaven, or with the celestial space immediately surrounding it. Yet no writer on comparative theology has ever brought out the facts which establish this assertion. All right, and then in John O'Neill, in the book The Night of the Gods, which is another one of these books that I'm trudging through. They're like 1,000-page books, but they're just so interesting, so interesting. He writes, mankind's oldest religion centered on a god of the celestial pole. Now, why is that? Why do all these ancient cultures have a supreme universal monarch who is a god of light, who sits on top of a mountain in the North Pole specifically? Where are they getting these ideas from? The primitive Chinese religion and astronomy honor the celestial pole as the home of the supreme God, and I'll get into that too. And the supreme god resided at the north celestial pole, just like the Iranian god Kivan, who also occupied the polar center. Chinese astronomers designated the celestial pole as the pivot, identifying the genie of the pivot as the universal monarch at the pole. The theme is older than Chinese or Iranian tradition, for it finds its first expression in the Sumero-Babylonian An, or Anu, the highest god, acknowledged as the universal monarch who reigned at the celestial pole. Each evening at Erech, the priests looked to the celestial pole, beginning their prayer with the words, "O star of Anu, prince of the heavens." And this universal monarch, this god that the ancient nations worshipped, was the god of the axis. It was a god that was central in the north, that the entire universe turned around. It says, an alchemical text proclaims, "At the pole is the heart of Mercurius, which is the resting place of his lord." And he says, I'm skipping along here, global myths insist that when the first civilizations rose from barbarism, a brilliant light occupied the celestial pole. This steadfast light was the ancient sun god, reportedly identified as a planet, the universal monarch. Now, it's strange because we look up in the sky today in the north and we see a little speck. What is that? Alpha Draconis, the North Star. Follow the ladle of the Big Dipper and find the North Star there. It's just like one more star among all the other stars of the sky. And you can see, if you have one of those cameras that takes still images every so many minutes and then put all the pictures together, you can see that the entire heavens are turning about the North Pole. You can see that. But if you're just a regular person going outside at night and looking, you don't really see that much. You don't really perceive the movement of the entire heavens around this central dot in the sky. And why would that be all that impressive? So impressive that all these ancients worshipped this being in the north as the god who gave benevolent gifts to mankind. I don't know about you, but I've never received a benevolent gift from the North Star, or ever perceived that something that happened in my life was because of the North Star. All right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the night of... let's go with this. Paradise Found. All nations have some tradition of a paradise, a place of primeval happiness, a state of innocence and delight. And this location of paradise is where the universal monarch lived, and this location of paradise is presumed to be at the North Pole, or is understood by all ancient nations as being at the North Pole. Paradise being at the North Pole of the earth. This locality, being the abode of the gods, is paradise. It is round in form, and like Eden, it is the Mount of the Assembly. Now, this is interesting. I'm reading Paradise Found, written in 1885 by William F. Warren, and he's going through the ancient mythologies associating this mountain in the North Pole with paradise, with the location of the god, and he's drawing all these connections, and his thesis is essentially that Eden was initially located at the North Pole, and that Eden was a mountain. Now, I come to some different conclusions than he does, as any of you that have read Eden's Fate knows. However, when I wrote Eden's Fate, I hadn't found anybody that had ever said that Eden was a mountain. And so here I am reading this guy 150 years ago talking about Eden being a mountain. I thought that was really cool. Because we think of Eden as a garden, maybe this tropical paradise on the edge of a beach or something, some beautiful location in a valley or a plain. But actually, Eden was a garden on the side of a mountain, Mount Eden. Okay, so anyway, you can get Eden's Fate and find out more about that. But I thought it was interesting that this guy was writing similar things almost 200 years ago. So he says and he's taking from ancient mythologies. Very cool. So like the Gan Eden of Genesis, it is described as a garden with a marvelous tree in the midst, also with a fountain of immortality, from which proceed 4 rivers, which flow in opposite direction toward the 4 quarters of the earth. You say, as he's describing Genesis. He's describing Genesis chapter 2. No, actually what he's referring to is an ancient Chinese text describing paradise. Sparkling fountains and purling streams contain the far-famed ambrosia. Where is this mountain located? According to Xin Tungkyun, A General Account of the Gods and Genii in 22 volumes. It's located at the North Pole. And here is the great pillar that sustains the world, upon which the heavens turn about, and it's no less than 300,000 miles high, according to the Chinese. Interesting. Here we have it says, the Akkadians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Indians, Chinese, and others give the same thing under various names, but it's always easily recognizable as this Weltberg, or Mountain of the World, situated at the North Pole of the Earth, supporting or otherwise connecting with the city of the gods and serving as the axis around which the sun and the moon and the stars revolve. Bruch, the foremost authority in ancient Egyptian geography, ancient Egyptian now, places the highest and most sacred part of the Egyptians' earth at the north, making the land there to rise until it comes in actual contact with heaven. The Akkadians had in like manner a mountain of the world, which unlike all other mountains, in that it was a support on which the heavens rested and around which they revolved. This was their great mountain in the north, the Akkadians. The name of that mountain was called Karsak Kura. It was so rich with gold and silver and precious stones as to be dazzling to the sight. An ancient Akkadian hymn respecting it uses this language, O mighty mountain of Bel. Its horn, like the brilliance of the sun, is bright. In another hymn, apparently of great antiquity, we find the goddess Ishtar addressed as queen of this mountain of the world. In an invocation to Ashur, the Assyrians write, Ashur, the mighty god who dwells in the temple of Karsak Kura. That's the mountain of the north, where paradise is. Feasts of the silver mountain, the heavenly courts. And the translator makes the expression refer to this Assyrian equivalent of the Greeks' Mount Olympus. Among the Chinese, we find a similar thing. The upper is situated in the upper mountain or pillar is situated in the center or pole of heaven. The lower, directly under it, at the center or pole of the northern terrestrial hemisphere. The pillar connecting them is this axis of the heavenly vault. And the ancient Chinese, quoting ancient Chinese manuscripts, their god that lived on the mountain was Shang-Ti. And the mountain, his palace, was 800 feet square and 80,000 feet high. And the Chinese astronomers expressly state the polar star is the center of heaven. All right. Kunlun is the name of the mountain where Shang-Ti lives. It's situated at the northwest, 50,000 lei, I don't know if that's feet or what, 50,000 lei from the Sungkao Mountains, and is the center of the earth. It is 11,000 lei in height. In the Hindu conception and tradition, man proceeded from Mount Meru. His Eden land was called Ilavarta, and the Indians say that it was located at the pole. All right, Mount Meru. Let's look at Mount Meru of the Indians, of the Hindus. The Hindu mountain Meru, the residence of the gods at the pole, is the column which unites the earth and sky, the axis of the world, the highest terrestrial spot, and the central point of the visible heaven. It is of fabulous height, goes through the earth, and protrudes to the other side. There are 2 pole stars. Now that is extremely interesting, but I can't get into that today. There are 2 pole stars, one at each end, north and south. At the upper end are Indra, the gods, and the great rishis. There's 9 of them. Remember, Santa has 9 reindeer. There's 9 rishis. And the lower demons have their abode. And Meru is located at the North Pole. Mount Meru is found in the Puranas. The earth is said to be flat and bounded by a circular chain of mountains, and in the center is an immense convexivity, Mount Meru, the pillar or axis of the world which sustains and unites the heavens, the earth, and the hells, that is to say, the 3 worlds. Meru is sometimes loosely called the North Pole. The 4 flanks of this holy mountain face the 4 cardinal points and are 4 different colors, and 4 rivers spring from a single source at the top of the mountain and flow in the 4 cardinal directions. You say, that sounds like Genesis chapter 2. It does, but they didn't get it from Moses. because these things are written before Moses. Now, is Moses copying the Hindus? Is that what I'm saying? No, I'm not. But there's this weird thing where all ancient cultures had very similar concepts. And we have the advantage of the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, to read about some of these things. But there's a lot going on here, and there was something that the heathen, that all the nations of the world were witnessing, that God evidently patterned the literal Garden of Eden after. All right? The Buddhists admit there is one tree of life, the jambu, from whose roots 4 rivers issue, and the jambu tree grows on the top of the mountain. All right? Let's see, what else do we have here? The Finnish culture, the Finnish god known as Ukko, was also said to have upheld the firmament above, equivalent to the Greek Atlas. Ukko was known as Taivan Napaean, which means the nail of heaven. The Scandinavians believed that the heavenly support was known as Veraldal Nagi, which translates as the world nail, but was also known as the North Nail. The ancient Finns, the North Star, was likewise known as Bonavale, the nail of the north, and the Lapps too believe in this North Nail, which supports the sky. Even in ancient Persia, we find the North Star having been known as the nail in the middle of the sky, or at least what modern researchers attribute to the North Star. What else do we have here? The cosmic mountain. Throughout the world, one encounters the story of a shining peak which once rose to the center of heaven. The Egyptians knew the Great Column as the primeval hill. The Babylonians called it the World Mountain. In Hinduism, it was known as the cosmic Meru. Now, again, it's important to point out that everything that's being described about this great mountain that all cultures talk about, there is not a single physical geographical location on Earth that can match these descriptions. Furthermore, why would all the cultures be talking about a singular mountain somewhere? Even if it was Mount Ararat, let's say. Why would the people in Egypt be talking about Mount Ararat? Or even Mount Everest, right? Why would the Greeks care about Mount Everest? They never saw it. Why would they be writing about it? There's something about this mountain that's cosmic in nature. What was it that they were looking at? All right? The Hinduism knew it as the cosmic Meru, the Indian myth as Hera Berazati, the Chinese knew it as Kunlun, Mexican cosmology gave it the name of Colhuacan, and we're all familiar with the Greek Mount Olympus, and there's even some interesting correlation to the Hebrew Mount Zion. Because bear in mind, even Paul in the book of Hebrews wrote about, but the Mount Zion which is above, right? So we have an earthly Mount Zion, but there's also a heavenly Mount Zion. There's a cosmic Mount Zion. All right, is that what they're describing? How are these cultures seeing into the third heaven? I would argue that they're not. But then what is it? What was it that they were seeing? What was it that they were seeing? What do we have here? The ancients sanctified a familiar hill, giving it the name of the primeval mount, and they sought to characterize their own land as a duplication of the homeland. So what this author, David Talbot, is getting at in explaining is ancient civilizations, a lot of them are built circular. Even the Stonehenge, you have several super ancient sites in Greece and also in the UK that are circular in nature, and they have these concentric circles going out. Even Plato's description of Atlantis was similar. And they're building civilization in accordance with something that they're seeing in the heavens. They're trying to pattern the heavens upon the earth so that the blessing of the gods will be upon their civilization. They're seeing order in the creation above and trying to manifest order in the creation below. And so there comes that saying, as above, so below. Some of that type of stuff. In Egyptian hieroglyphics, you have the Aten sign and the sign for the mountain, which literal meaning is the Mount of Glory. It's the venerable hill of primeval beginning. And in the pyramid texts, we read, I am the primeval hill of the land in the midst of the sea, whose hand no earthlings have grasped. All right? Oh, there's a lot of this stuff. Let's see. What do I want to go with? How much time do we have? Oh man, we're almost out of time. Okay, well, we better look at some of these scriptures before I run out of time. All right, so I've got a lot more that we can talk about. I think I'll get into some of it next week. But this concept of the God being in the north, what I'm calling North Pole theology, it's not just found in the Bible. North Pole theology, is found across the entire globe. And it's not like Jewish missionaries went to all these countries and taught them about God being in the north. They already knew there was a God in the north. And they described him and the things that he did. So what is going on here? It's so crazy. The thing that's crazy is we can come to all these different interpretations and hypotheses, but what cannot be denied is that every single culture was describing virtually the same thing. A great shining God in the north who sat upon the top of a cosmic mountain or a cosmic pillar or an obelisk or a ladder. It was Jacob's ladder. He saw God at the top of a column coming down from the sky. They all describe the same thing. Now the question is, what were they talking about? Because you go out and look at the sky now and we do not see whatever it was they were seeing. All right? And that smacks against the belief system of uniformitarianism. A uniformitarian believes that as things are now is how they always were and how they always will be. But we know that that's completely absurd, especially from a Bible standpoint. If you're a Bible believer, you don't believe in uniformitarianism because the world that we have now is very different from the world that was, let's say, in the days of Noah. All right? There's chaos. There's chaos that can occur in the earth, and so why can't there be chaos in the universe? What makes you so certain that the arrangement of the planets as they are now is how they always have been arranged? We have a fairly stable solar system at this time. Why exactly do you think that it has to always be that way? Could the planets have been on different courses in different times in history? It's an interesting thing to think about. Anyway, you have Psalm 75:6, for promotion cometh neither from the east nor from the west nor from the south, but you'd expect a mention of the north in verse 6 or in verse 7, but the psalmist says, but God is the judge, associating God with the north, right? Psalms 48:1, great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, the mountain of his holiness. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion. Now look at what it says here, in the sides of the north, the city of the great king. What the psalmist talks about there, obviously we know it's referring to Jehovah. We know that it can be referring to earthly Jerusalem in the millennium, or it can be referring to heavenly Jerusalem right now. But what's amazing is the Greeks talked about the same mountain, and they had a different name for their god, but it was the same concept. So did the Hindus. So did the Chinese. The Jews talked about Jehovah on the top of a mountain. The Chinese talked about Shangti at the top of Kunlun. Right? The Hindus talked about Brahma at the top of Mount Meru. Now, there's something about this mountain in the north that's not just the hill of the little mountain of Jerusalem, Zion in Jerusalem, because you have Isaiah chapter 14, and it's talking about Lucifer wanting to ascend and being cast down, which puts you before Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. And you have in Isaiah chapter 14, it says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, the light bearer, son of the morning. He was cast down from the north. He says, how art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, the stars. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation, the mountain of the congregation, where? In the sides of the north I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High, because he's on the mountaintop. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. In Ezekiel 28, Lucifer, prior to his fall, is said to have been in Eden, the garden of God. And he says, thou wast upon the holy mountain of God, and thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Now, those stones of fire, we could speculate on what those are, but you think it's out of the realm of possibility that a stone of fire could have something to do with a star? With comets, what's a comet? It's a rock, a meteor of fire. Could be celestial. There's a lot of things in the Bible that when you actually think about it, it seems like it's talking about something celestial. Job 22:12 says, "Is not God in the height of heaven? And behold, the height of the stars, how high they are." Isaiah 40:22 says, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth." Right? So it implies that God is sitting on the earth, which puts him in the north and the earth in the south. God is in the north. There's an interesting prophecy in Isaiah chapter 2 where it says, I'll go there. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, it says, "And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the tops of the mountains." Now this is referring to Jesus reigning in the millennium, but it says, "The mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it." Now, maybe there's an allegorization there where the mountains are an allegory for the nations. And so Jerusalem, Israel as a nation, is exalted above the other nations. It's a mountain above the other mountains. I'm okay with that. But if there's a literal application here, which is possible, Mount Zion in Jerusalem is established above all the tops of the other mountains. How is that possible? How is Mount Zion going to be taller than Mount Everest? Is God going to grow it? I don't know. Is God going to cast down the other mountains at the second advent by shaking the earth? It's very possible, and maybe Mount Zion will remain. But one way or the other, it looks like in the millennium, Jesus is going to be ruling from Jerusalem, Mount Zion, and that mountain is going to be above the mountains of the earth. And you're going to have a scenario in the millennium where the nations are coming to this mountain, and this is a tall mountain, it's a high mountain, and there's a God, a great God of light, Jesus Christ, sitting atop the mountain. Like the Chinese will say, "This sounds familiar. Is that not Shang-Ti?" Well, no, not exactly. It's Jesus Christ, actually. Is that Mount Meru? No, it's Mount Zion, but you're close. It's very similar. Very similar, but not quite. You see, there's something weird going on in these ancient texts. There's something that the ancients were describing that just doesn't have any familiarity in our modern world. What was it? What were they looking at? What were they measuring? What were they giving detailed descriptions of? And why is it that it matches so closely to the things that we read in the Bible? That's an interesting question that I'm going to let you think about until next week, when I talk about the circumambulating around the Christmas tree. Why do people dance around the maypole? Why is that indeed? So there's so much interesting information here. Literally, if you're watching online, let me show you what I had ready for today. If you're listening, I'm sorry you can't see this, but this is all the stuff that I had ready for today. I think I only scratched the surface. But what I'll do is I'll include in the show notes the books that I referenced, and you can check them out for yourself if you want. Like I said, they're big books, but they're super interesting. So if you want to check them out, please feel free to do so. I'll put the link in the show notes. Thank you for trying out the YouTube stream. I know a lot of you are watching right now on YouTube, and it seems like it went pretty well. Not too complicated, fortunately. Everything worked. Didn't have my computer crash. Glad for that. So anyway, hope you learned something. Like I said at the beginning, I am certain. I've been doing this for long enough. I've been in these circles, Bible-believing circles, long enough that I know that the things that I had to say today are not the things that you normally hear in church, to put it lightly. I am certain that you probably heard something you've never heard before today, and I'm certain you're going to hear something next week you've never heard before either. So thank you for tuning in. Tell your friends about Final Fight Bible Radio. Tell your friends to tune in on Fridays for the live broadcast. And if you're not a premium subscriber, give it a try. 1 month free. Just $5 a month after that, and it helps support this ministry. God bless you. Have a good week.